Right. Hello, everyone. It's by popular demand. It's Mike and Dave. Hey, Mike. Nice to see you again. And it's
Good to be here, Dave.
Monday afternoon. How are you doing today? You good?
Yeah, I am good. It's been an interesting morning, but that's what our lives are made up of, interesting mornings where sometimes you have to dig deep. And
Yeah.
this morning was one of those, but part of the job.
Well, actually, it's funny I asked you that because I thought that that would be a really good topic for us to talk about. How do we manage our minds? When we have a difficult moment, or when someone says something to us, or even just when we find our minds just drifting off and going places that then sometimes our thinking creates all sorts of emotions. And I know that there's a lot of people out there have different techniques and ways of doing it. I thought it'd be good for us to discuss, how do we deal with our minds, and our
Mm.
thinking. And yeah, so, well, how should we start? I mean, let me throw it at you since I'm talking. That would be a good thing. Your mind. What's your mind like, Mike? What's it like in there?
Wow. Um, I'm often rather glad that people cannot read my mind because the mind can be there can be so much that is going on. I remember reading one study, David, and I might get the figures slightly wrong, but basically it came from Harvard, but it says something along these lines about 48% of our thinking is just totally unstructured. In other words, it's stimulated by something that we see that creates an association. And so, what's my mind like? I definitely know that I fit into that stat because the mind can be
Mm,
just so busy. But I think what is just so important is that we do develop techniques and strategies to be mindful about our mind as often as possible. Otherwise, we can be thinking things that are just really, really not helpful to us. And
mm,
those who can develop, I suppose, would it be right to say mind power? But mind disciplines are
discipline.
probably in a healthier space in life than those who are not. So Susan Davis got a great
Mm.
line where she says, "Who's in charge, the thinker or the thought?" And
Oh,
that's
that's very good.
yeah.
Yeah, that's very good. And so I know in counseling terms, they talk about the internal narrative. What is the story that's going on that we're telling ourselves? And I know that there's this voice right in our head, or at least I have a voice. Hopefully you do. um, there's a voice that kind of talks through stuff, right? When inside my head, it's that internal narrative. And then you can become an observer of that voice. I don't know if I know what's really has helped me is I used to, when I was younger, I used to only have that voice. That voice would almost control how I was thinking. I'd run this story and I would kind of believe the internal story hands down and just act on it. And then as I grew up and started to become more mature, I realized I could become an observer of the voice inside my mind. And I could actually say, no, actually, that's not the right story that I'm telling myself. I think there's a different way of looking at it. You can almost enact on it. Now, I know we're going straight in deep here, but for me, if I don't keep a control on my thoughts can go wild. I have to tell you, I can find myself quickly taking something that somebody said and going down a course of action that leads to a whole bunch of emotion that gets connected to it. And the poor guy doesn't even know that all this is going on in my head, right? And I'm sure most people have this going on. Similar to echo for you.
No, no, totally. And sometimes there's not only one voice in your mind, there's different voices fighting for the microphone. You know? And it's like, whoa, can somebody just slow this down?
Yes.
And I think that's why things such as mindfulness, contemplativeness, prayerfulness, breathing, all these different techniques are just so important
Yeah.
because what is going on here. And the more I can become aware of it and be purposeful and intentional in my thinking, not all the time,
Mm, mm,
certainly more of the time, it's
mm,
probably where I need to be.
mm. I
What,
love that.
yeah. I was going to say, what do you do when you find yourself all over the show? Do you have any techniques or things that you go to?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think, over the years, I've become more and more aware of the need to control my thinking and not just go where it wants to go. So I think the first thing for me was awareness. So the more aware I am, and the effects of allowing my mind just to run, it's I start to feel it in my stomach. I can feel like almost starting anxiety starts to build when my mind is overactive. And so I guess I got two things. The first thing I do, if I really want to control my mind, is I get a piece of paper and a pen out, and I just start to write down the key things that I'm thinking through. Not only anxiety or fears or those sorts, but even if it's a problem, I will try and write it down. Or I am learning more and more the need for some distraction. So I play the piano, as you know, Mike. So sometimes I'll actually just pause and go just play the keyboard for 20 minutes, half an hour, and I 9 times out of 10 can come back and my mind has settled into some kind of organized framework. And if I don't do one of those two things, distract myself or write it or externalize it, I guess, by writing it down, it goes straight to creating anxiety, and I can feel getting overwhelmed. Um, because I don't believe our minds are wired to deal with multiple things all at the same time, and we need to structure our thinking. So, that's what I tend to do: write stuff down or go and do something completely different, distracting for me. Some people might be a run. I think you used to run, didn't you? So it might be a run or something, and it's just allow the mind to kind of settle through it. Yeah. And
Mm.
Jude, same question. What's your thoughts?
Um, I try and, I've got a couple of words that I purposely try and engage every single day that are about the mindset or the person that I want to be.
Mm,
And I think if we've got certain narratives, mantras, things that we go back to, in ancient wisdom or in the Bible, there's that verse which talks about renewing your mind
mm,
and renewing your mind in text, in the word. And I think for us as human beings, we like almost your piano playing. It's, can I get the right words that I focus on in my mind? There's this powerful experiment that was done by a guy called John Barge, a New York University psychologist. And what they did is they gave students 5 words that they had to continually make sentences with. And I think you've heard this, Dave. So the one group of students got words such as bald, gray, wrinkled, forgetful, Florida. And the students had to make sentences with those 5 words for 15 minutes, just keep shooting them out. And every single one of their sentences obviously related to age. And what was quite interesting is that when the students were then asked to do another experiment in another auditorium, they noticed how these students walked slower, uh, more like old people. And it's just very, very powerful that the words that we circulating in our minds begin to manifest itself in what we do. And
love that.
so what I try and do, again, not all the time, but certainly in the morning, it's one of my rituals in the morning is I've developed my own 5 words, which I just try and focus on and make sentences of. But it links to, in a sense, to who I want to be. And
Beautiful.
I think that's part of the mindful discipline that we sometimes need is it choosing what you are going to think. And
Yeah.
in actual
Yeah.
fact, thinking it.
Yes. Oh, I so love what you're saying, because I guess another way of talking about it is groundedness. It's finding your place of truth. So, yeah, I'm aware the scripture says to renew your mind. And what that really means is bring your mind back to truth, bring your mind back to a groundedness, values and principles that you know are true, And I think that's the problem. Is sometimes when our minds are allowed to just kind of go off where they were, they become unhinged from their foundation, and they need to be continually brought back to a datum point. And I think the trouble is if we don't know what our principles are, we don't know what our truth is, because you're talking about those 5 words is your truth. It's what you are believing is the principal values for you, and then they give you, I guess, like coat hooks to hang your thoughts on, right? And I find I need to come back to truth. I also, who am I ask myself the same question as you. It's a Dave, who am I? Okay, I am this. I am not angry. I'm in control. I know who I am. And you come back to a centeredness. I think so. In Christian thinking, the Bible becomes your place of centeredness. So you wash your thinking through that. I know in other religions they have their own truth, and I think that's I love this point. Create your place of truth. What are your hooks to hang your thoughts on? And if you don't have the hooks, maybe that's a good starting point to go with. How about this one then, Mike? Another thing I would grow up in: as someone thinks, so they become. The way someone thinks, so they become. Kind of talking a little bit about your illustration there, but you elaborate on that. As someone thinks, so they become.
Yeah. I like the sort of narrative which goes that our thinking becomes what we say becomes our actions become our habit, and our habits become our character. And I think that ties in exactly what you're saying. What we think is ultimately what we begin to do. And again, going back to that other point there, then, so if I can be proactive about what I think about me, is then probably going to manifest itself in what people see, the actions that they demonstrate. So it just, I think, just really highlights once again that some of the biggest self-care work that we can do is probably in the area of strengthening what we're thinking. And because the thoughts do without a doubt become, the actions. And if I think I can't speak or talk, then it's going to demonstrate itself in a shyness or a timidness towards people, driven by the mind.
Yeah. And if we don't challenge those thoughts, they become, in other words, strongholds. They become like walls. And so we become, our minds literally become more solid and less agile. And we have what's called in therapy limiting belief. Limiting belief is that because we haven't challenged our thinking, because we've not been pushed to challenge why do we think that, we form these huge, great barriers. And our world literally becomes smaller because we haven't taken discipline over our mind, which is so true. Yeah.
And the same is true of organizations. So if we talk about an organizational culture, we see the manifestation of assumptions, core beliefs in the practices that people do. So if you wanting to understand a corporate culture, go in, witness what is actually evident, what people are doing, and then we want to ask the question which goes, I wonder what the underlying assumption, core belief is, the mindset which drives that practice. Now, sometimes what we try and then do in corporate is we try and implement a value or a way of being, but not engaging the mindset. So we are saying to people, we want you to collaborate more. Yet meanwhile, the core assumption or the underlying belief in the organization doesn't support collaboration. It supports individualism. It supports we reward the guy who performs, not the team.
Yes. Yes.
And it doesn't matter how much you try and push the collaboration, the core belief is actually going to win at the end of the day. Do you agree with it?
Yeah, so it's so true. How many companies have I been to where what I see written on the wall and what I see in the hearts of the people are so misaligned? And what we need is we need to connect the thinking of the people aligned to the truth or the values that we espouse on the wall, which kind of goes to that thing we were just saying, that we renew our mind, right? We need to bring the collective mind into alignment with the truth or the principles that we hold as a value as a family or as a business or whatever community we are building. But the trouble is this disconnect creates this huge tension and this huge problem. So I think there is this real recurring theme of what is our truth, what is helping to anchor our thinking together. So
how do you discover your underlying core beliefs, David? Do you have any thoughts there?
Well,
question, I know.
That's his podcast is going to become a marathon one, but we should explore the detail maybe in another one. But look, I know that our core beliefs are we firstly are finding them through our culture and our upbringing, right? What our parents tell us, etc. And then we challenge them as we grow up and we go forward. I do think though that things start with vision. I think if we're able to create a vision of where we would like to be, I know Stephen Covey talks about finding your own personal mission statement, and he starts with your epitaph. What do you want people to say of you when you pass? Write your own epitaph. And I think if you don't know where to start, that's a great place to start. What do you want people to say of you? And usually we'll say things like, he was kind, he was generous, he was loving, he forgave people, he, a man of integrity. Well, already right there, you've got some great principles, right, that you can start with. So, I think everyone does need a personalized mission statement. You have one in 5 words. We need something that becomes our truth. So that truth, I think, can be informed by religion, faith, our parents. It certainly can be informed by all those things, but it needs to be something owned by us, I think, if it's going to have the power to discipline our mind. We've got to really believe it. Same question to you. Let's see if you can answer that in 30 seconds too. Where does our belief?
I suppose again, it's to be brave enough to look at the things that you do and even the thoughts that you think, and then say, what is the underlying core belief that brings this out? And it's quite brave thinking to do, but if we want to change our behavior, we probably got to find that source which says, if I see the world as a scarce place, then obviously I'm in competition against everybody, and so therefore I show up in this very, very competing, maybe even jealous, envious way of things. But underneath that, there's a script that is driving that, a mind script. And so we want to recognize it, and then the whole mind mapping process of what is the new script that I want to try and live into. And it's not easy to rewrite that script, but if we focus on it enough and hear it enough, I think the science is showing, the neuroplasticity, that intentional neuroplasticity can begin to take place. But it's often interesting. Look at the things that you do, and then just probably ask the questions: what's the belief or the mental state that is underneath this?
I love that. I love that.
Yeah,
I love it. Well, Mike, I think we should be doing another podcast very soon and just keep this thing going, because I think we're living in a world that's fighting for our attention all the time. And everything we do, device we look at is screaming for our attention. Our thoughts are all over the place. And I think if we're going to live lives, leaders, we're going to be influenced, people of integrity, we need to be people that master our thinking. And so I think this is a hugely important thing for us to learn. So let's explore it again in the future. So Mike, thanks for joining me again. And I'll look forward to our next podcast. And let's do a part 2 on how we manage our thinking and we discipline and become all those things that we need to be. Thanks for joining me, Mike. We'll chat soon.
Always good chatting.